Question 1. To address the challenge of implementing new Symantec Endpoint Protection 14 policies that could potentially affect critical business operations, which approach best ensures a balance between enhanced security and operational continuity? Option A. Immediately deploy the new policies as recommended by the vendor to ensure the latest security protections are active. Option B. Implement the changes without any prior assessment, relying on IT support to address any issues that arise post-deployment. Option C. Prioritize the technical security benefits of the new policies, assuming that any operational disruptions will be minor and manageable. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment involving stakeholder consultation, risk analysis, and testing to identify and mitigate potential disruptions before deployment. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment involving stakeholder consultation, risk analysis, and testing to identify and mitigate potential disruptions before deployment. Explanation. Scenario analysis. The scenario presents a common challenge in IT security administration, balancing the need for robust protection with the potential for disruption to critical business operations. Implementing new security policies, especially those that significantly alter user behavior or system configurations, requires careful consideration of their impact. The challenge lies in anticipating and mitigating negative consequences, such as decreased productivity, system instability, or user resistance, while still achieving the security objectives. This necessitates a proactive and data-driven approach rather than a reactive one. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves conducting a thorough impact assessment before deploying significant changes to Symantec Endpoint Protection (SEP) policies. This assessment should identify potential risks to business operations, user productivity, and system performance. It involves engaging with stakeholders, understanding critical business processes, and testing the proposed changes in a controlled environment. This aligns with best practices in IT change management and risk management, ensuring that security enhancements do not inadvertently cripple essential functions. From a regulatory and ethical standpoint, organizations have a duty to maintain operational continuity and protect sensitive data. A well-executed impact assessment helps fulfill this duty by minimizing unforeseen disruptions and ensuring that security measures are effective without causing undue harm. Incorrect approach is analysis. Implementing changes without any prior assessment is a direct violation of sound IT governance principles and can lead to significant operational failures. This approach disregards the potential for negative consequences, making it a reactive and irresponsible method. It fails to consider the organization's responsibility to maintain business continuity, which is often implicitly or explicitly covered by general data protection and operational resilience regulations. Deploying changes solely based on vendor recommendations without considering the specific environment and business needs is also problematic. While vendor guidance is valuable, it is generic. Organizations must tailor security solutions to their unique risk profile and operational context. This approach risks implementing overly restrictive or incompatible policies, leading to operational disruptions, and potentially failing to address the most critical threats relevant to the organization. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence in understanding the specific impact on the organization's operations. Focusing exclusively on the technical security benefits without considering the operational impact is a common but flawed approach. Security is a component of overall business risk management. Overlooking the human and operational elements can lead to user frustration, workarounds that bypass security controls, and ultimately, a less secure environment. This approach fails to recognize that effective security is integrated with, not separate from, business operations. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured change management process that includes a mandatory impact assessment phase for any significant SEP policy modifications. This process should involve 1. Defining the scope of the change and its objectives. 2. Identifying all affected systems, users, and business processes. 3. Consulting with relevant stakeholders, e.g., IT operations, business unit managers, end users. 4. Evaluating potential risks and benefits, including performance, usability, and security. 5. Developing mitigation strategies for identified risks. 6. Planning for phased deployment and rollback procedures. 7. Establishing clear communication channels throughout the process. This systematic approach ensures that security decisions are informed, balanced, and aligned with organizational goals, minimizing disruption and maximizing effectiveness. Question 2. Process analysis reveals that an organization is experiencing an increase in security alerts related to potentially unwanted applications, PUA, detected by Symantec Endpoint Protection 14. The security team needs to implement a strategy to manage these detections effectively. Which of the following approaches represents the most professional and effective best practice for managing PUA detections within the Symantec Endpoint Protection 14 environment? Option A. Disable PUA detection entirely in Symantec Endpoint Protection 14 to avoid any potential disruption to business operations caused by legitimate applications being flagged. Option B. Configure Symantec Endpoint Protection 14 to block PUAs based solely on vendor definitions, without any prior testing or analysis of the organization's specific software inventory. Option C. Immediately configure Symantec Endpoint Protection 14 to block all detected PUAs to ensure maximum protection against potential threats. Option D. Enable PUA detection in Symantec Endpoint Protection 14 and set the policy to log detections only, without taking any blocking or remediation actions, for an initial period to allow for review and analysis of the detected applications within the organization's specific environment. Correct answer is C. Immediately configure Symantec Endpoint Protection 14 to block all detected PUAs to ensure maximum protection against potential threats. Explanation. Scenario analysis. The scenario presents a common challenge in endpoint security administration, balancing the need for robust protection with the potential for disruption to legitimate business operations. Administrators must make critical decisions regarding the configuration of Symantec Endpoint Protection (SEP) policies, specifically concerning the management of potentially unwanted applications, PUA. The professional challenge lies in accurately identifying PUAs, understanding their potential impact, and implementing policies that effectively mitigate risks without hindering productivity or causing false positives that require extensive remediation. This requires a deep understanding of the SEP product, the organization's specific software landscape, and the potential threat vectors. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a phased and controlled approach to PUA management. This begins with a thorough discovery and assessment phase to identify applications that exhibit PUA characteristics within the organization's environment. This is followed by a detection-only mode for a defined period. During this phase, SEP logs PUA detections without taking any blocking or remediation actions. This allows administrators to review the detected applications, determine their legitimacy and necessity for business operations, and assess the potential impact of blocking them. Based on this analysis, a targeted policy can then be developed to either block specific, confirmed PUAs or to allow legitimate applications that might be misclassified. This approach aligns with best practices for risk management and operational continuity, ensuring that security measures are effective without causing undue disruption. It also allows for informed decision-making based on empirical data gathered from the environment. Incorrect approach is analysis. Enabling immediate blocking of all detected PUAs without prior assessment is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach risks disrupting critical business processes by blocking legitimate software that may be misidentified as a PUA. Such disruption can lead to financial losses, reputational damage, and non-compliance with service-level agreements. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to understand the organization's specific operational needs. Configuring SEP to ignore all PUA detections is also professionally unacceptable. This approach completely negates the security benefits of PUA detection, leaving the organization vulnerable to threats that can be delivered through these applications. It represents a failure to implement a reasonable security posture and a disregard for the potential risks associated with PUAs, which can include adware, spyware, and other unwanted software that compromises user privacy and system integrity. Implementing a policy that blocks PUAs based solely on vendor definitions without any environmental context or testing is another flawed approach. While vendor definitions are a starting point, they are not always perfectly tailored to an organization's unique software inventory and usage patterns. This can lead to a high rate of false positives, similar to immediate blocking, causing operational disruption and requiring significant administrative overhead for remediation. It fails to demonstrate a proactive and tailored security strategy. Professional reasoning. professionals should adopt a risk-based, iterative approach to security policy implementation. This involves understanding the organization's threat landscape, its critical assets, and its operational requirements. When implementing new security controls such as PUA management, a phased rollout is essential. This typically includes 1. Discovery and assessment, understand what is present in the environment. 2. Detection-only mode, monitor and gather data without impacting operations. 3. Analysis and tuning, evaluate the data to identify false positives and legitimate risks. 4. Targeted remediation/blocking, implement policies based on informed decisions. 5. Ongoing monitoring and review, continuously assess the effectiveness of policies and adapt as needed. This structured decision-making process ensures that security measures are both effective and practical, minimizing unintended consequences and aligning with organizational objectives. Question 3. The monitoring system demonstrates unusual network traffic patterns originating from a specific subnet, raising concerns about potential unauthorized activity. As the administrator of Symantec Endpoint Protection 14, you need to configure the intrusion prevention system IPS to address this. Which of the following actions is the most appropriate and professionally sound approach to mitigate this risk while ensuring minimal disruption to legitimate network operations? Option A. Implement a generic IPS rule that blocks all inbound and outbound traffic from the entire suspected subnet without further detailed analysis of the traffic content. Option B. Broadly enable all available IPS signatures within Symantec Endpoint Protection 14 to ensure maximum coverage against any potential threat. Option C. Disable the intrusion prevention system component of Symantec Endpoint Protection 14 for the affected subnet to immediately eliminate any performance concerns or false positives. Option D. Analyze the specific nature of the unusual traffic patterns to identify known malicious signatures or behavioral anomalies, and then create a custom IPS rule to specifically block or alert on that identified traffic. The correct answer is D. Analyze the specific nature of the unusual traffic patterns to identify known malicious signatures or behavioral anomalies, and then create a custom IPS rule to specifically block or alert on that identified traffic. Explanation. This scenario presents a common implementation challenge in network security administration, balancing the need for comprehensive threat detection with the potential for performance degradation and alert fatigue. The administrator must make a critical decision regarding the configuration of Symantec Endpoint Protection SEP 14's intrusion prevention system IPS to address a specific type of network anomaly without negatively impacting legitimate business operations or introducing new vulnerabilities. The challenge lies in accurately identifying the root cause of the unusual network traffic patterns and selecting the most appropriate SCP-14 configuration to mitigate the risk while adhering to operational requirements and security best practices. The correct approach involves a methodical investigation and targeted configuration. By first analyzing the specific nature of the unusual network traffic patterns to determine if they align with known malicious signatures or behavioral anomalies, the administrator can then apply a precisely defined IPS rule. This ensures that only genuinely suspicious traffic is flagged or blocked, minimizing false positives and avoiding disruption to critical services. This approach represents best professional practice because it is data-driven, minimizes operational impact, and directly addresses the identified threat without overbroadly restricting network activity. It aligns with the principle of least privilege and the need for precise security controls. An incorrect approach would be to broadly enable all IPS signatures or to disable the IPS entirely. Broadly enabling all signatures, while seemingly comprehensive, is highly likely to generate a significant volume of false positives. This alert fatigue can lead to legitimate security incidents being overlooked, a critical failure in operational security. Furthermore, it can severely impact network performance, potentially disrupting business-critical applications, which is an unacceptable operational outcome. Disabling the IPS entirely, while eliminating performance concerns and false positives, leaves the network vulnerable to the very threats the IPS is designed to detect. This represents a direct failure to implement a fundamental security control, exposing the organization to significant risk. Another incorrect approach would be to implement a generic IPS rule that blocks all traffic from the suspected source IP addresses without further analysis. This is a blunt instrument that could inadvertently block legitimate traffic from trusted partners or internal systems, causing significant business disruption and demonstrating a lack of due diligence in understanding the traffic's nature. The professional decision-making process for such situations involves a structured approach. 1. Define the problem. Clearly understand the observed anomaly and its potential implications. 2. Gather data. Collect logs, network traffic captures, and system performance metrics. 3. Analyze data. Correlate findings to identify the root cause and specific threat indicators. 4. Evaluate solutions. Consider available SCP-14 features and configurations, assessing their potential impact on security and operations. 5. Implement and test. Apply the chosen solution in a controlled manner and monitor its effectiveness and impact. 6. Refine. Adjust configurations based on ongoing monitoring and feedback. This systematic process ensures that security measures are effective, efficient, and aligned with organizational objectives. Question 4. Cost-benefit analysis shows that deploying a critical Symantec endpoint protection 14 patch immediately to all endpoints carries a high risk of operational disruption, while delaying the patch significantly increases the organization's exposure to the identified vulnerability. Which of the following approaches best balances security requirements with business continuity and regulatory compliance? Option A. Request a full system audit and re-architecture before considering any patch deployment to ensure complete compatibility, even if it means prolonged vulnerability exposure. Option B. Implement a phased rollout of the patch, beginning with a pilot group of non-critical endpoints, followed by a broader deployment after successful validation, with clear rollback procedures in place. Option C. Deploy the patch to all endpoints immediately to eliminate the security risk as quickly as possible, accepting the potential for operational disruption. Option D. Defer the patch deployment indefinitely until a less disruptive time, prioritizing current operational stability over addressing the known vulnerability. The correct answer is B. Implement a phased rollout of the patch, beginning with a pilot group of non-critical endpoints, followed by a broader deployment after successful validation, with clear rollback procedures in place. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity administration, balancing immediate operational needs with long-term security posture and compliance. The administrator must decide how to address a newly identified vulnerability in Symantec endpoint protection, SCP-14, which could impact a significant portion of the organization's endpoints. The professional challenge lies in the inherent tension between the urgency of patching a critical vulnerability and the potential disruption to business operations that a widespread, untested patch deployment could cause. This requires a nuanced decision-making process that considers technical feasibility, business impact, and regulatory adherence. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a structured, risk-based deployment strategy. By first testing the patch in a controlled environment, the administrator can identify and mitigate potential compatibility issues or unintended consequences before they affect the entire production environment. This aligns with the principle of due diligence in cybersecurity, ensuring that security measures are implemented effectively without introducing new risks. Furthermore, this methodical approach supports regulatory compliance by demonstrating a proactive and responsible management of security risks, which is often a requirement in frameworks mandating robust patch management and incident response. An incorrect approach that involves immediately deploying the patch to all endpoints without testing fails to acknowledge the potential for unforeseen negative impacts. This could lead to widespread system instability, rendering critical business functions inoperable and potentially violating service-level agreements or even data protection regulations if sensitive operations are disrupted. Such a hasty deployment demonstrates a lack of risk assessment and could be seen as negligent, especially if it leads to a significant security or operational incident. Another incorrect approach, delaying the patch indefinitely due to fear of disruption, is equally problematic. This inaction leaves the organization exposed to the identified vulnerability, increasing the likelihood of a successful cyber attack. This failure to address known security risks can have severe regulatory consequences, particularly under frameworks that mandate timely remediation of vulnerabilities. It also represents a dereliction of professional duty to maintain a secure environment. Finally, an approach that focuses solely on the cost of the patch without considering the potential cost of a breach or operational downtime is flawed. This narrow financial perspective ignores the broader risk landscape and the potential for significant financial and reputational damage. Effective professional reasoning requires a holistic view that integrates technical, operational, and financial considerations, always guided by a commitment to security and compliance. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Risk assessment. Thoroughly understand the vulnerability, its exploitability, and the potential impact of a breach. 2. Impact analysis. Evaluate the potential impact of deploying the patch on critical business operations and systems. 3. Testing strategy. Develop a phased testing plan starting with a representative sample of endpoints. 4. Rollout plan. Create a detailed plan for a staged rollout, including rollback procedures. 5. Communication. Maintain clear communication with stakeholders regarding the patch status and any potential impacts. 6. Compliance review. Ensure the chosen approach aligns with all relevant regulatory requirements for patch management and incident response. Question 5. Consider a scenario where you are tasked with deploying a new Symantec endpoint protection (SEP) policy that includes significant changes to firewall rules and application control settings across a large enterprise. The goal is to enhance security posture against emerging threats. What is the most professionally responsible approach to implementing this policy update? Option A. Deploy the new SEP policy to all endpoints and then address any user-reported issues as they arise. Option B. Deploy the new SEP policy only to a small group of IT administrators who can test its functionality. Option C. Immediately deploy the new SEP policy to all endpoints to ensure uniform protection against the latest threats. Option D. Implement the new SEP policy in a phased rollout, starting with a pilot group of diverse users and systems before a full deployment. Correct answer is C. Immediately deploy the new SEP policy to all endpoints to ensure uniform protection against the latest threats. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in enterprise security administration, balancing the need for robust security with the operational requirements of end users and the potential for disruption. The administrator must make a decision that impacts a significant portion of the user base, requiring careful consideration of technical efficacy, user impact, and adherence to established security policies and potential regulatory compliance. The challenge lies in the potential for a misstep to either leave the organization vulnerable or cripple essential business functions, both of which carry significant professional and organizational risk. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased rollout of the SEP policy update, starting with a pilot group. This represents best professional practice because it allows for real-world testing of the policy's impact on a controlled subset of the environment before a full deployment. This mitigates the risk of widespread disruption. From a regulatory and compliance perspective, this methodical approach demonstrates due diligence. If a policy change inadvertently causes an outage or data loss, a phased rollout provides a traceable and manageable incident response. It aligns with principles of risk management, ensuring that potential negative consequences are identified and addressed early. This approach also allows for gathering user feedback and technical telemetry to refine the policy, ensuring it is both effective and practical. Incorrect approach is analysis. Implementing the policy update immediately across all endpoints without testing is professionally unacceptable. This approach disregards the potential for unforeseen conflicts with existing software, hardware, or user workflows, which could lead to widespread system instability or complete outages. This failure to adequately test and validate a critical security change constitutes negligence and a breach of professional duty to maintain a secure and functional environment. It also increases the likelihood of non-compliance if the disruption impacts critical business operations or data access, potentially violating service-level agreements or regulatory requirements for business continuity. Rolling out the policy update only to a small, non-representative group of users, e.g., only IT staff, is also professionally flawed. While it involves some level of testing, if the pilot group does not accurately reflect the diversity of the user base and their specific application or hardware configurations, the testing will be insufficient. This can lead to the same widespread issues upon broader deployment as if no pilot had been conducted. It demonstrates a lack of thoroughness in risk assessment and a failure to adequately represent the entire user population in the validation process, potentially leading to compliance issues if critical user groups are negatively impacted. Ignoring user feedback after the policy update is implemented is another professionally unsound approach. Security policies are not static and must adapt to the operational realities of the organization. Failing to collect and act upon user feedback means that potential usability issues or performance degradations that impact productivity will persist. This can lead to workarounds that bypass security controls, creating new vulnerabilities. Ethically, it demonstrates a disregard for the user experience and can undermine trust in the IT security team. From a compliance standpoint, persistent operational disruptions can lead to breaches of service-level agreements or regulatory mandates related to system availability. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that prioritizes risk assessment, phased implementation, and continuous monitoring. This involves 1. Understanding the objective, clearly define the security goal of the policy update. 2. Assessing the impact, evaluate potential technical, operational, and user impacts. 3. Developing a phased rollout plan, design a strategy that includes pilot testing with representative user groups. 4. Establishing clear communication channels, inform stakeholders about the planned changes and potential impacts. 5. Implementing robust monitoring and feedback mechanisms, track performance and gather user input during and after deployment. 6. Having a rollback plan, be prepared to revert the changes if significant issues arise. This systematic approach ensures that security enhancements are implemented effectively while minimizing disruption and maintaining compliance. Question 6. The investigation demonstrates that a critical business application hosted on a server protected by Symantec Endpoint Protection (SEP) is experiencing significant performance degradation. Initial analysis suggests a potential conflict between SEP's real-time scanning or intrusion prevention components and the application's operational processes. The administrator must resolve this issue promptly to restore application functionality without compromising the server's security posture. What is the most appropriate course of action for the SEP administrator? Option A. Temporarily disable all Symantec endpoint protection components on the affected server until the application issue is resolved. Option B. Systematically identify the specific SEP component or rule causing the conflict through controlled testing, and then create a targeted exclusion or policy adjustment for that specific component or rule, documenting all changes. Option C. Advise the business unit to cease using the critical application until a future, unspecified SEP update might resolve the performance issue. Option D. Implement a broad exclusion rule within SEP for the entire directory where the critical application is installed, allowing all files and processes within it to bypass scanning. The correct answer is A. Temporarily disable all Symantec endpoint protection components on the affected server until the application issue is resolved. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in endpoint security administration, balancing the need for robust protection with the operational requirements of business applications. The investigation into a critical application's performance degradation due to Symantec endpoint protection (SEP) requires a nuanced approach. Simply disabling SEP components risks exposing the network to threats, while ignoring the application issue can lead to significant business disruption and financial loss. The administrator must navigate these competing priorities while adhering to established security policies and potentially regulatory compliance requirements, making careful judgment essential. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic, controlled, and documented process of identifying the specific SEP component causing the conflict and implementing a targeted exclusion. This aligns with best professional practice by prioritizing security while addressing operational needs. It demonstrates a commitment to maintaining a secure environment by not broadly disabling security features. Furthermore, it adheres to the principle of least privilege by only making necessary adjustments. This methodical approach also facilitates auditing and troubleshooting, ensuring that any changes are traceable and reversible if necessary, which is crucial for compliance and incident response. Incorrect approach is analysis. Disabling all SEP components for the affected server is a severe regulatory and ethical failure. It represents a complete abdication of security responsibility, leaving the server and potentially the entire network vulnerable to malware, ransomware, and other cyber threats. This action directly violates the fundamental purpose of deploying endpoint protection and would likely contravene internal security policies and any relevant data protection regulations, e.g., GDPR if applicable to the jurisdiction, though for this exam, we focus on the exam's implied jurisdiction. Implementing a broad exclusion for the entire application directory without first identifying the specific SCP component causing the conflict is also professionally unacceptable. While it might resolve the performance issue, it significantly weakens security by allowing potentially malicious files or processes within that directory to bypass SCP's detection and prevention mechanisms. This increases the attack surface and could lead to a security breach, again violating security policies and potentially regulatory mandates. Ignoring the application performance issue and continuing with the current SCP configuration, despite the business impact, is also a suboptimal approach. While it maintains the security posture, it fails to address a critical operational problem that could have significant business consequences, including financial losses and reputational damage. In some regulated environments, failure to ensure business continuity could also have compliance implications, depending on the specific industry and regulations. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such situations by first gathering all relevant information, specific application details, observed performance issues, and any SCP logs or alerts. The next step is to consult internal security policies and procedures for handling application conflicts. If direct troubleshooting is required, it should be performed in a controlled environment or during scheduled maintenance windows. Communication with application owners and stakeholders is paramount. The decision-making process should prioritize security, followed by operational continuity, and always involve thorough documentation of all actions taken and their justifications. Question 7. Upon reviewing the planned deployment of new Symantec endpoint protection, 14 policies designed to enhance threat detection capabilities, which approach best ensures minimal disruption to ongoing business operations while effectively implementing the security enhancements. Option A. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment, including pilot testing, analysis of dependencies, and development of rollback and communication plans for full deployment. Option B. Focus exclusively on the technical security benefits of the new SCP-14 policies, assuming minimal operational impact. Option C. Implement the new SCP-14 policies only on a limited number of non-critical workstations to gauge initial performance. Option D. Immediately deploy the new SCP-14 policies across the entire network to ensure all endpoints are protected as quickly as possible. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment, including pilot testing, analysis of dependencies, and development of rollback and communication plans before full deployment. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT security administration, balancing the need for robust protection with the operational realities of a business. The introduction of a new, potentially disruptive security measure requires careful consideration of its impact on existing workflows and user productivity. The challenge lies in anticipating and mitigating these impacts before they negatively affect business operations, which could lead to user workarounds that bypass security controls or significant downtime. Professional judgment is required to assess the potential risks and benefits and to implement the change in a manner that minimizes disruption while maximizing security. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive impact assessment. This aligns with best practices in IT change management and security deployment, which are implicitly supported by regulatory frameworks that mandate risk management and due diligence. A thorough impact assessment would involve identifying all systems, applications, and user groups that might be affected by the new Symantec endpoint protection, SEP-14 policies. It would include testing the policies in a pilot environment to identify potential conflicts, performance issues, or unintended consequences. Furthermore, it would involve developing a rollback plan and a communication strategy to inform stakeholders and provide necessary training. This proactive, risk-based approach ensures that security enhancements are implemented effectively and efficiently, minimizing business disruption and maintaining compliance with any relevant data protection or operational continuity regulations. Incorrect approach is analysis. Implementing the new SCP-14 policies without any prior assessment is a direct violation of due diligence principles. This approach risks widespread operational disruption, potential data breaches if the new policies inadvertently create vulnerabilities, and significant user dissatisfaction. It fails to meet the implicit regulatory requirement to manage IT changes responsibly and to protect organizational assets and operations. Deploying the policies only to a small, non-critical segment of the network without broader testing or consideration of interdependencies is also insufficient. While it might seem like a limited test, it doesn't capture the full scope of potential impacts across the entire organization, especially in complex, interconnected environments. This approach lacks the comprehensive analysis needed to understand the true impact on critical business functions, and may lead to unforeseen issues when rolled out more broadly. Focusing solely on the technical security benefits of SCP-14 without considering the operational impact is an incomplete assessment. While the security features are paramount, their successful implementation depends on their compatibility with the existing IT infrastructure and user workflows. Ignoring operational impacts can lead to user resistance, system instability, and ultimately, a failure to achieve the desired security posture due to workarounds or system failures. This approach neglects the holistic view required for effective IT security management, which is a cornerstone of regulatory compliance in areas like operational resilience and data integrity. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured change management process that includes a thorough impact assessment before deploying significant security updates like SCP-14. This process should involve 1. Identification of the change and its objectives. 2. Detailed analysis of potential impacts on systems, applications, users, and business processes. 3. Risk assessment of identified impacts. 4. Development of mitigation strategies including testing, training, and rollback plans. 5. Stakeholder communication and approval. 6. Controlled deployment and post-implementation monitoring. This systematic approach ensures that security enhancements are implemented responsibly, minimizing risks and maximizing benefits, thereby upholding professional standards and regulatory expectations. Question 8. System analysis indicates that a critical business unit requires immediate access to a specific external resource that is currently blocked by a Symantec Endpoint Protection 14 firewall policy due to its classification as potentially risky. The business unit manager is pressuring the security administrator to grant an immediate exception to allow access, stating that a delay will result in significant financial losses. The administrator has the authority to temporarily modify the policy, but is aware of the potential security implications and the organization's adherence to data protection guidelines. Option A. Immediately grant the exception by modifying the firewall policy to allow access to the external resource, but make a note of the change in a personal log for future reference. Option B. Document the request, assess the potential risks of granting the exception, consult with IT management and compliance to obtain formal approval for a temporary policy modification, and then implement the approved change with a scheduled review and removal date. Option C. Refuse the request outright, citing the security policy and the potential risks, and advise the business unit to find an alternative method to conduct their operations. Option D. Grant the exception by modifying the firewall policy, but do not inform any other IT or security personnel about the change to avoid unnecessary bureaucracy. The correct answer is A. Immediately grant the exception by modifying the firewall policy to allow access to the external resource, but make a note of the change in a personal log for future reference. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge involving a conflict between immediate operational needs and the long-term security posture of an organization. The administrator is pressured to bypass established security protocols for a perceived short-term gain, which could lead to significant security vulnerabilities and potential non-compliance with data protection regulations. The ethical dilemma lies in balancing the urgency of business operations with the responsibility to maintain robust security. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes adherence to established security policies and regulatory frameworks. In the context of Symantec Endpoint Protection 14 administration, this means following the documented procedures for policy exceptions, which typically involve a formal request, risk assessment, and approval from relevant stakeholders. This aligns with best practices for change management and security governance, ensuring that any deviation from standard security settings is understood, documented, and authorized, thereby minimizing risk and maintaining compliance with potential regulatory requirements related to data security and incident response. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately granting the exception without proper documentation or approval. This bypasses the established change control process, creating an undocumented security gap. This could lead to a failure to meet audit requirements and potentially violate regulations that mandate clear security policies and their consistent application. It also sets a dangerous precedent for future requests, undermining the integrity of the security posture. Another incorrect approach is to refuse the request outright without considering the business impact or exploring alternative, secure solutions. While prioritizing security is crucial, a complete refusal without engagement can hinder business operations and may not be the most effective long-term solution. This approach lacks the collaborative problem-solving expected of a security administrator and could lead to the user seeking less secure, unauthorized workarounds. A third incorrect approach is to implement the exception but fail to document it or notify relevant security personnel. This is a critical failure in security management and incident response. Without proper documentation, the security team cannot accurately assess the organization's risk landscape, and in the event of a security incident, it would be impossible to determine if the exception contributed to the breach. This directly contravenes principles of accountability and transparency in security operations. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making process that involves understanding the request, assessing the associated risks against established security policies and regulatory obligations, consulting with relevant stakeholders, e.g., IT management, compliance officers, and following documented procedures for exception. This process ensures that decisions are informed, defensible, and aligned with the organization's overall security strategy and legal responsibilities. Question 9. Examination of the data shows a critical alert indicating a new, potentially widespread malware variant has been detected on a small number of endpoints within the organization. The alert suggests rapid propagation capabilities. As the administrator, what is the most prudent immediate course of action to manage this situation? Option A. Initiate a phased containment strategy, starting with isolating the affected endpoints and performing a rapid threat analysis to determine the scope and impact before proceeding with broader remediation. Option B. Immediately implement a system-wide quarantine of all endpoints to prevent any further potential spread of the detected malware. Option C. Defer any action until a full, in-depth analysis of the malware's behavior is completed by a specialized security team, which may take several hours. Option D. Disable the Symantec endpoint protection client on all endpoints to avoid any potential conflicts with the new malware and allow for manual investigation. The correct answer is A. Initiate a phased containment strategy, starting with isolating the affected endpoints and performing a rapid threat analysis to determine the scope and impact before proceeding with broader remediation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in endpoint security administration, balancing the need for rapid threat response with the potential for disruption to business operations. The administrator must quickly assess the impact of a newly detected threat and implement appropriate containment measures without causing widespread system outages or data loss. The pressure to act swiftly, coupled with the uncertainty of the threat's true nature and scope, requires a methodical and informed decision-making process. The challenge lies in selecting an approach that is both effective against the threat and minimizes collateral damage, all while adhering to established operational procedures and potential regulatory compliance requirements related to incident response and data integrity. Correct approach analysis. The most professional approach involves a phased containment strategy. This begins with isolating the affected endpoints to prevent further spread of the threat. Simultaneously, detailed analysis of the threat's behavior and impact is crucial. This analysis informs the decision on whether to quarantine the threat, remove it, or deploy a broader remediation action. This measured approach ensures that the response is proportionate to the threat, minimizes disruption to legitimate business processes, and allows for a more targeted and effective resolution. It aligns with best practices in incident response, which emphasize containment, eradication, and recovery, and implicitly supports regulatory frameworks that mandate timely and effective security incident handling to protect data and maintain operational continuity. Incorrect approach is analysis. Implementing an immediate, system-wide quarantine of all endpoints without prior analysis is a premature and potentially damaging action. This approach fails to differentiate between infected and clean systems, leading to unnecessary disruption of business operations and potential loss of productivity. Ethically and professionally, this demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to apply a risk-based approach to incident response. Could also violate service-level agreements or internal policies that require minimizing operational impact. Disabling the Symantec endpoint protection client on all endpoints is an even more severe and counterproductive response. This action would leave all systems vulnerable to the current threat and any other potential malware, effectively abandoning security measures. This is a clear failure of professional responsibility and a direct contravention of the primary objective of endpoint protection. It would also likely violate numerous regulatory requirements concerning the maintenance of adequate security controls and the protection of sensitive data. Ignoring the alert and waiting for further information without any initial containment measures is also professionally unacceptable. While analysis is important, delaying any action in the face of a detected threat increases the risk of widespread infection and significant damage. This passive approach demonstrates a lack of proactivity and a failure to adhere to the principles of timely incident response, potentially leading to severe security breaches and regulatory noncompliance. Professional reasoning. Professionals faced with such a scenario should follow a structured incident response plan. This typically involves 1. Identification and initial assessment of the alert. 2. Containment of the threat to limit its spread. 3. Eradication of the threat from affected systems. 4. Recovery of affected systems and data. 5. Post-incident analysis and lessons learned. The decision-making process should prioritize minimizing impact while effectively neutralizing the threat, always considering the potential for business disruption and data integrity. This systematic approach ensures that actions are deliberate, justified, and aligned with both security best practices and organizational objectives. Question 10. Performance analysis shows a significant increase in detected malware incidents across the network, prompting a review of the current Symantec Endpoint Protection (SEP) 14 policy. The current policy is configured with moderate protection settings. A more aggressive policy, offering enhanced detection and prevention capabilities, is available but carries a higher potential for system resource utilization and compatibility issues with certain legacy applications. The administrator needs to decide on the best course of action to improve security without causing undue operational disruption. Option A. Defer any policy changes until a comprehensive audit of all applications and hardware can be completed to guarantee zero impact from the enhanced policy. Option B. Apply the enhanced protection policy only to critical servers and high-value workstations, leaving other endpoints on the current moderate policy to avoid potential compatibility issues. Option C. Immediately deploy the enhanced protection policy to all endpoints to ensure maximum security coverage against the rising malware incidents. Option D. Implement the enhanced protection policy across all endpoints in a phased rollout, starting with a pilot group of non-critical systems to monitor for any adverse effects before proceeding with a wider deployment. The correct answer is D. Implement the enhanced protection policy across all endpoints in a phased rollout, starting with a pilot group of non-critical systems to monitor for any adverse effects before proceeding with a wider deployment. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in endpoint security administration, balancing proactive threat mitigation with the potential for disruption to critical business operations. The administrator must interpret performance data, understand the implications of different SEP policy configurations, and make a decision that aligns with organizational risk tolerance and operational continuity. The challenge lies in the inherent uncertainty of threat landscapes and the potential for unintended consequences of security policy changes. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased, risk-based deployment strategy. This aligns with best professional practice by prioritizing the protection of critical assets while minimizing the risk of widespread disruption. By initially applying the stricter policy to a pilot group of non-critical systems, the administrator can validate its effectiveness and identify any compatibility issues or performance degradations before a broader rollout. This methodical approach is crucial for maintaining operational integrity and demonstrating due diligence in security management. It reflects a commitment to a controlled and informed decision-making process, essential for responsible IT governance. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing the stricter policy across all systems immediately, without prior testing, represents a failure to adequately assess risk and potential impact. This could lead to significant operational downtime, data loss, or financial repercussions, violating the principle of maintaining business continuity. Such an action would be professionally negligent, as it bypasses essential validation steps. Applying the stricter policy only to critical systems while leaving others unprotected creates a significant security gap. This approach prioritizes operational continuity over comprehensive security, leaving the organization vulnerable to threats that could exploit less protected endpoints. This imbalance is a failure to uphold the organization's security posture and could lead to breaches. Delaying any policy change indefinitely due to fear of disruption ignores the evolving threat landscape and the potential for existing policies to be insufficient. This passive approach increases the organization's risk exposure over time, as new threats emerge and existing vulnerabilities are exploited. It demonstrates a lack of proactive security management and a failure to adapt to changing security requirements. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that includes 1. Thorough analysis of performance data and threat intelligence. 2. Risk assessment of potential policy changes, considering both security benefits and operational impacts. 3. Development of a phased deployment or testing strategy for significant changes. 4. Clear communication with stakeholders regarding proposed changes and their rationale. And 5. Continuous monitoring and evaluation of security controls and their impact. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are informed, justifiable, and aligned with organizational objectives and risk appetite. Question 11. Compliance review shows a newly identified critical vulnerability in a widely used third-party application deployed across various departments. The vulnerability has a high exploitability score and could potentially lead to unauthorized access to sensitive customer data. The IT security team is considering several immediate actions, which approach best aligns with regulatory requirements for risk management and demonstrates professional due diligence. Option A. Roll back the application to the previous stable version while awaiting a more comprehensive patch from the vendor. Option B. Ignore the vulnerability for now, as the affected application is primarily used for internal reporting and is not directly exposed to the internet. Option C. Immediately deploy the vendor-provided patch to all affected systems without further analysis to mitigate the risk as quickly as possible. Option D. Conduct a thorough risk assessment to understand the specific impact on the organization's environment, prioritize affected systems, and develop a targeted remediation plan. The correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough risk assessment to understand the specific impact on the organization's environment, prioritize affected systems, and develop a targeted remediation plan. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity administration, balancing the need for robust security controls with the operational realities of a dynamic IT environment. The challenge lies in accurately assessing the risk posed by a newly discovered vulnerability in a widely used application, considering its potential impact on the organization's data and systems, while also factoring in the complexity and resource constraints of remediation. A hasty or incomplete risk assessment can lead to either overallocation of resources on low-impact threats or underprotection against critical ones, both of which have significant compliance and operational implications. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented risk assessment process that aligns with established cybersecurity frameworks and organizational policies. This process should prioritize understanding the specific context of the vulnerability within the organization's environment. Key steps include identifying affected assets, evaluating the likelihood of exploitation, and determining the potential business impact. This methodical approach ensures that remediation efforts are proportionate to the actual risk, thereby optimizing resource allocation and demonstrating due diligence to regulatory bodies. By focusing on the specific threat and its potential impact on the organization's sensitive data and critical functions, This approach directly addresses the core principles of risk management mandated by regulatory frameworks. It ensures that decisions are data-driven and defensible, minimizing the likelihood of compliance violations related to inadequate security measures or data breaches. Incorrect approach is analysis. Implementing a patch immediately without a proper risk assessment is procedurally flawed. While seemingly proactive, it bypasses the critical step of understanding the actual risk posed by the vulnerability in the organization's specific context. This can lead to unnecessary disruption, resource drain on low-priority issues, and potential introduction of new problems if the patch itself is unstable or incompatible. From a regulatory perspective, this approach fails to demonstrate a structured risk management process, which is often a requirement for compliance. Ignoring the vulnerability because it affects a non-critical system is a significant ethical and regulatory failure. All systems, even those deemed non-critical, can potentially be entry points for attackers to pivot to more sensitive areas of the network. Furthermore, regulatory frameworks often mandate a comprehensive approach to security, not one that selectively addresses perceived high-risk areas. This approach demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to protect the organization's assets holistically, potentially leading to severe compliance penalties if a breach occurs through the neglected system. Rolling back the application to a previous version without assessing the security implications of the older version is also problematic. Older versions may have known, unpatched vulnerabilities that are even more severe than the one being addressed. This approach prioritizes a quick fix over a secure solution and fails to conduct a thorough risk assessment of the alternative state. It also risks introducing new compliance issues if the older version does not meet current security standards or regulatory requirements. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach this situation by first understanding the organization's specific risk appetite and regulatory obligations. The decision-making process should involve 1. Gathering detailed information about the vulnerability and its exploitability. 2. Identifying all systems and data that could be affected. 3. Assessing the potential business impact, financial, reputational, operational, legal. 4. Evaluating the likelihood of exploitation based on threat intelligence and internal security posture. 5. Developing a remediation plan that prioritizes based on the assessed risk, considering factors like patch stability, testing requirements, and resource availability. 6. Documenting the entire process, including the rationale for decisions made, to ensure auditability and compliance. Question 12. Analysis of a Symantec endpoint protection. SEP, manager-administrator, discovers unusual activity logs indicating unauthorized access to sensitive threat intelligence reports within the SEP Manager console. The administrator suspects a potential internal security breach or unauthorized data exfiltration. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for the administrator to take? Adhering to best practices for security incident response and data protection within a U.S. regulatory context. Option A. Ignore the log entries, assuming they are false positives or minor system anomalies, and continue with routine administrative tasks. Option B. Delete the suspicious log entries to prevent further unauthorized access and avoid potential repercussions for the organization. Option C. Immediately escalate the findings to the designated security incident response team and relevant management, while initiating basic, authorized containment measures within their administrative scope. Option D. Conduct a thorough, independent forensic investigation of the SEP Manager logs to identify the source and extent of the unauthorized access before reporting it. The correct answer is C. Immediately escalate the findings to the designated security incident response team and relevant management, while initiating basic, authorized containment measures within their administrative scope. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge involving the potential misuse of sensitive security data. The administrator has discovered evidence of unauthorized access to confidential threat intelligence reports within Symantec Endpoint Protection, SEP, Manager. This situation is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need to investigate and secure the environment with the ethical and regulatory obligations concerning data privacy and incident reporting. The administrator must act decisively to protect the organization's assets and comply with relevant regulations without overstepping their authority or compromising the integrity of the investigation. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves immediately escalating the issue to the designated security incident response team and slash, or the appropriate management personnel, while simultaneously initiating basic containment measures within the scope of their administrative privileges. This aligns with best professional practices and regulatory expectations for incident handling. In the context of U.S. regulations, such as those potentially influenced by NIST guidelines or internal corporate policies that mirror these principles, prompt reporting and escalation are paramount. This ensures that a coordinated and authorized response can be mounted, adhering to established protocols for data breach investigation and remediation. It also preserves the integrity of evidence for potential forensic analysis and legal proceedings. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach would be to ignore the findings, assuming it was a minor or isolated incident. This is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It violates the duty of care to protect organizational assets and could lead to severe consequences if the unauthorized access escalates or results in a data breach. From a compliance perspective, failing to report or investigate a potential security incident can result in penalties under various data protection laws if sensitive information is compromised. Another incorrect approach would be to conduct a full-scale investigation independently, without informing or involving the appropriate security teams or management. This bypasses established incident response procedures, potentially contaminates evidence, and could lead to actions that conflict with broader organizational security strategies or legal requirements. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of teamwork and respect for established governance structures. Regulatory frameworks often mandate specific reporting lines and authorization for security investigations, which this approach would violate. A third incorrect approach would be to immediately delete the logs or attempt to cover up the incident. This is not only unethical, but also a severe regulatory violation. It constitutes obstruction of justice or a breach of evidence preservation protocols, which can have serious legal repercussions. Such actions would undermine any subsequent investigation and demonstrate a complete disregard for professional integrity and organizational security. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a dilemma should follow a structured decision-making process. First, recognize the potential severity of the situation and the need for immediate action. Second, consult internal policies and procedures for incident response. Third, prioritize reporting and escalation to the appropriate authorities within the organization. Fourth, take only necessary and authorized containment actions. Finally, cooperate fully with the designated incident response team and follow their guidance throughout the investigation and remediation process. This systematic approach ensures compliance, ethical conduct, and effective security management. Question 13. The evaluation methodology shows that a new Symantec Endpoint Protection 14 policy is proposed to enhance threat detection capabilities. Before deploying this policy across the entire organization, what is the most critical step to ensure its successful integration and minimize disruption? Option A. Proceed with a phased rollout, starting with less critical servers and then expanding to user workstations. Option B. Rely on the default policy settings provided by Symantec to ensure broad compatibility. Option C. Immediately deploy the policy to a small group of IT staff for initial testing and feedback. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment involving technical teams and business unit representatives to identify potential conflicts and dependencies. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment involving technical teams and business unit representatives to identify potential conflicts and dependencies. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT security administration, balancing the need for robust protection with the operational realities of a business environment. The administrator must assess the potential impact of a new security policy on existing workflows and systems. This requires a thorough understanding of both the technical implications of the policy and the business processes it might affect. The professional challenge lies in identifying and mitigating risks without unduly hindering productivity or introducing new vulnerabilities. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented impact assessment. This process should identify all systems, applications, and user groups that will be affected by the proposed Symantec Endpoint Protection 14 policy. It necessitates engaging with stakeholders from various departments to understand their dependencies and potential disruptions. Documenting these findings, potential risks, and proposed mitigation strategies is crucial for informed decision-making and provides an audit trail. This aligns with best practices for change management and risk management, ensuring that security enhancements are implemented responsibly and with minimal negative consequences. Regulatory frameworks, while not explicitly detailed for this exam's jurisdiction, generally mandate due diligence in implementing security measures and managing associated risks. An incorrect approach would be to implement the policy without a comprehensive assessment. This could lead to unforeseen system outages, data loss, or significant user productivity declines, all of which could have financial and reputational repercussions for the organization. Such an oversight would represent a failure in due diligence and risk management. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on technical data without considering the business context. While technical feasibility is important, ignoring how users interact with systems or how business processes function can lead to policies that are technically sound but practically unworkable. This demonstrates a lack of holistic understanding and can result in resistance from users and operational inefficiencies. A third incorrect approach is to prioritize speed of implementation over thoroughness. While timely security updates are important, rushing through an impact assessment can lead to overlooking critical dependencies or potential conflicts. This can create more problems than it solves and undermine the overall security posture. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Define the scope of the change and its objectives. 2. Identify all potential stakeholders and affected systems. 3. Conduct a thorough risk assessment considering technical, operational, and business impacts. 4. Develop mitigation strategies for identified risks. 5. Document the entire process, including findings, decisions, and justifications. 6. Obtain necessary approvals before implementation. 7. Plan for post-implementation monitoring and validation. Question 14. The assessment process reveals that a new Symantec endpoint protection policy is designed to enhance threat detection by more aggressively scanning for specific types of potentially unwanted applications, PUA. This policy, if implemented globally, could potentially impact the performance of certain legacy applications critical to daily operations and may generate a higher volume of user-reported alerts. What is the most professionally responsible approach to deploying this new PUA scanning policy? Option A. Delay the implementation of the new PUA scanning policy indefinitely until all potential user concerns and application compatibility issues can be fully resolved. Option B. Implement the new PUA scanning policy across the organization without prior testing, relying on the vendor's assurance of its effectiveness. Option C. Deploy the new PUA scanning policy to a small, representative pilot group of endpoints first, monitor for performance issues and user feedback, and then proceed with a phased rollout to the broader organization based on the pilot results. Option D. Immediately deploy the new PUA scanning policy to all endpoints across the organization to ensure uniform protection against potential threats. The correct answer is C. Deploy the new PUA scanning policy to a small, representative pilot group of endpoints first, monitor for performance issues and user feedback, and then proceed with a phased rollout to the broader organization based on the pilot results. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a common challenge in Symantec endpoint protection, SEP, administration, balancing robust security posture with operational efficiency and user experience. In this scenario, the challenge lies in effectively managing SEP policies across a diverse endpoint environment, ensuring compliance without hindering legitimate business operations. The need for a phased rollout of a new policy, particularly one impacting user behavior or system performance, is a critical consideration. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a controlled and measured deployment. By initially applying the new policy to a pilot group, administrators can validate its effectiveness, identify any unintended consequences, and gather feedback before a full-scale implementation. This iterative process minimizes risk, reduces potential disruption, and allows for necessary adjustments, aligning with the principle of least privilege and the need for demonstrable due diligence in security management. This aligns with general IT best practices for change management and risk mitigation, which are implicitly expected in professional administration roles. An incorrect approach that involves immediate global deployment of a significant policy change fails to acknowledge the inherent risks of widespread impact. This could lead to unforeseen system instability, user productivity loss, and a significant increase in support tickets, potentially violating service-level agreements or internal operational standards. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of foresight and a disregard for the potential negative impact on end users and business continuity. Another incorrect approach, which is to delay the policy implementation indefinitely due to potential user complaints, represents a failure to uphold security responsibilities. While user feedback is important, security policies are often mandated for compliance or risk reduction. Ignoring these requirements due to anticipated resistance is a dereliction of duty and can expose the organization to significant security vulnerabilities and potential regulatory noncompliance. This approach prioritizes short-term convenience over long-term security and organizational integrity. A further incorrect approach, such as implementing the policy without any form of testing or validation, is a direct contravention of sound IT governance principles. This deploy and pray method is highly risky and unprofessional, as it assumes the policy will work as intended without any empirical evidence. It increases the likelihood of critical failures and can lead to significant remediation efforts, costing more time and resources than a proactive, phased approach. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough risk assessment, a clear understanding of the policy's objectives and potential impact, and a structured deployment plan. This plan should include pilot testing, phased rollouts, comprehensive monitoring, and a rollback strategy. Communication with stakeholders, including end users and IT support teams, is also paramount throughout the process. Question 15. Research into the compatibility of a critical legacy financial application with Symantec Endpoint Protection 14 policies has revealed potential conflicts. The application is essential for daily transaction processing, and its downtime would have significant business implications. The IT security team needs to determine the most appropriate course of action to ensure both application functionality and robust endpoint protection. Which of the following approaches best balances the need for security with operational continuity? Option A. Implement a phased approach to policy tuning, starting with detection-only rules and monitoring for conflicts before enabling blocking actions. Option B. Defer any SEP policy adjustments until the legacy application can be fully replaced with a modern, compatible solution. Option C. Disable Symantec endpoint protection on the servers hosting the legacy application to guarantee uninterrupted operation. Option D. Apply a broad, highly restrictive SEP policy across all servers, assuming the legacy application will adapt or require manual exceptions later. The correct answer is C. Disable Symantec endpoint protection on the servers hosting the legacy application to guarantee uninterrupted operation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in endpoint security administration, balancing the need for robust protection with the operational requirements of business-critical applications. The core difficulty lies in identifying and mitigating potential conflicts between Symantec endpoint protection, SEP, policies, and the specific needs of a legacy application that is vital for daily operations. A misconfiguration or overly aggressive policy could lead to application downtime, impacting productivity and potentially revenue. Conversely, an overly permissive policy could leave the organization vulnerable to threats. The challenge is amplified by the fact that the application is legacy, meaning its compatibility with modern security solutions might be less predictable, and the IT team may have limited expertise or documentation for its internal workings. Careful judgment is required to ensure security is maintained without disrupting essential business functions. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic, risk-based methodology for policy tuning. This begins with thorough research and understanding of the legacy application's behavior and its specific dependencies. Implementing a phased rollout of policy changes, starting with a detection-only mode or a limited scope, allows for observation and validation without immediate impact. Utilizing SEP's logging and reporting features to monitor for any potential conflicts or false positives is crucial. This approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a data-driven decision-making process. It aligns with the principle of least privilege and defense in depth, ensuring that security measures are effective but not unnecessarily restrictive. From a regulatory and ethical standpoint, this methodical approach demonstrates due diligence in protecting organizational assets while also fulfilling the responsibility to maintain operational continuity. It minimizes the risk of unintended consequences and allows for informed adjustments based on observed behavior. Incorrect approach is analysis. Disabling SEP protection entirely for the affected servers is professionally unacceptable due to significant regulatory and ethical failures. This action directly contravenes the fundamental responsibility to protect the organization's information assets from cyber threats. It creates a gaping security hole, exposing the organization to malware, ransomware, and other malicious activities, which could lead to data breaches, financial losses, and reputational damage. Such a decision would likely violate data protection regulations, e.g., GDPR, CCPA, depending on jurisdiction, and internal security policies, leading to severe compliance penalties and potential legal repercussions. Applying a generic, overly restrictive SEP policy without prior testing or analysis is also professionally unacceptable. This approach fails to consider the specific operational needs of the business and the potential impact on critical applications. It demonstrates a lack of understanding of the principle of least privilege and can lead to unnecessary disruptions, impacting productivity and potentially causing financial harm. Ethically, it shows a disregard for the operational impact on end users and the business. Regulatory-wise, while seemingly security-focused, it can lead to non-compliance if the overly restrictive policy prevents legitimate business operations, especially if those operations are subject to specific regulatory requirements. Ignoring the issue and hoping for the best is the most egregious failure. This passive approach is a dereliction of duty for an IT security professional. It demonstrates a complete lack of proactive security management and a failure to address known or suspected risks. This inaction directly exposes the organization to significant threats and potential breaches, leading to severe regulatory noncompliance, financial penalties, and reputational damage. Ethically, it is a betrayal of the trust placed in the professional to safeguard the organization's digital environment. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that prioritizes risk assessment, impact analysis, and phased implementation. When faced with potential conflicts between security policies and operational needs, the process should involve 1. Understanding the threat landscape and the specific security objectives. 2. Thoroughly documenting the requirements and dependencies of the application in question. 3. Evaluating the potential risks associated with both overly restrictive and overly permissive security configurations. 4. Developing a testing plan that includes detection-only modes, limited scope deployments, and rollback procedures. 5. Utilizing monitoring and logging tools to gather data on policy effectiveness and potential conflicts. 6. Communicating findings and proposed solutions clearly to stakeholders, including business owners. 7. Implementing changes in a controlled and phased manner with continuous monitoring. This systematic approach ensures that security measures are effective, compliant, and do not unduly hinder business operation, fostering a balance between security and productivity. Question 16. The assessment process reveals that Symantec Endpoint Protection 14 is logging a significant number of unauthorized USB device connection attempts across multiple workstations. These attempts are not currently blocked, and the security team is debating the best course of action to ensure regulatory compliance regarding data security and system integrity. Which of the following actions best aligns with regulatory compliance requirements for administering Symantec Endpoint Protection 14 in this scenario? Option A. Configure Symantec Endpoint Protection 14 to block all unauthorized USB device usage, thereby preventing potential data exfiltration and malware introduction. Option B. Advise users to refrain from connecting unauthorized USB devices and rely on user adherence to security policies without implementing technical controls. Option C. Ignore the alerts as they are not currently causing any operational disruptions and focus on other critical security incidents. Option D. Document the unauthorized USB device connection, attempts in a risk register, and schedule a review for potential remediation in the next quarterly security audit. The correct answer is A. Configure Symantec Endpoint Protection 14 to block all unauthorized USB device usage, thereby preventing potential data exfiltration and malware introduction. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT security administration, balancing the need for robust security with the operational requirements of a business. The professional challenge lies in interpreting and applying regulatory frameworks to specific technical configurations, ensuring compliance without unduly hindering legitimate business operations. Careful judgment is required to understand the intent behind regulations and to implement controls that meet those objectives effectively. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the identified vulnerability by implementing a technical control that aligns with the principles of data protection and system integrity, which are fundamental to regulatory compliance. Configuring Symantec Endpoint Protection (SEP) to block unauthorized USB device usage, the administrator is proactively mitigating a known risk vector for malware introduction and data exfiltration. This action is directly supported by the general principles of data security and system hardening, often mandated by regulatory frameworks that require organizations to protect sensitive information and maintain the integrity of their IT systems. This proactive stance demonstrates a commitment to security best practices and regulatory adherence. An incorrect approach that involves simply documenting the risk without implementing a technical control fails to meet the proactive security obligations often implied or explicitly stated in regulatory guidelines. While documentation is important, it does not mitigate the actual risk. This approach could be seen as a failure to implement reasonable security measures, potentially violating regulations that require organizations to take steps to protect their data and systems. Another incorrect approach, which is to ignore the alert due to a perceived low impact, is a significant professional and regulatory failure. Regulatory frameworks typically require organizations to address identified security risks, regardless of their perceived immediate impact. Overlooking a potential security vulnerability, especially one that could lead to data breaches or system compromise, demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the organization's security posture and its regulatory obligations. This could lead to severe penalties if a breach occurs. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a risk-based approach that prioritizes the implementation of security controls based on the potential impact and likelihood of a threat. Administrators should consult relevant regulatory requirements and internal security policies to guide their decisions. When a vulnerability is identified, the immediate step should be to assess the risk and then implement the most effective and appropriate mitigation strategy, which often involves technical controls. If a technical control cannot be immediately implemented, a clear plan for remediation with defined timelines and responsible parties must be established, and the risk must be formally accepted by appropriate management. Question 17. The evaluation methodology shows that when configuring Symantec Endpoint Protection 14 for a multinational organization with operations in regions subject to strict data privacy regulations, a key consideration is the potential for incidental collection of personally identifiable information, PI, within security logs. Which of the following administrative approaches best aligns with regulatory compliance frameworks regarding data privacy and minimization? Option A. Implement broad, unrestricted access to all SCP log data for the security operations team to facilitate rapid incident response, without specific data retention or anonymization policies. Option B. Configure logging levels to capture only essential security event data. Implement data anonymization where feasible for reporting, and establish strict, role-based access controls for log data with defined retention periods. Option C. Assume that all data within security logs is exempt from data privacy regulations due to its security-focused nature, and therefore no specific data handling policies are required for SCP logs. Option D. Enable the highest possible logging verbosity across all SCP components to ensure no security event is missed, and store all logs indefinitely for future forensic analysis. The correct answer is B. Configure logging levels to capture only essential security event data, implement data anonymization where feasible for reporting, and establish strict, role-based access controls for log data with defined retention periods. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows that regulatory compliance is a critical component of administering Symantec Endpoint Protection, SEP 14, particularly concerning data privacy and security mandates. In this scenario, the challenge lies in balancing the need for comprehensive security monitoring and incident response with the legal and ethical obligations to protect sensitive personal data that might be incidentally collected by SCP's logging and reporting features. Professionals must navigate the complexities of data minimization, purpose limitation, and lawful processing as defined by relevant data protection regulations. The correct approach involves a proactive and documented strategy for data handling within SCP. This includes configuring logging levels to capture only necessary security-relevant information, anonymizing or pseudonymizing data where possible, establishing clear data retention policies aligned with regulatory requirements, and ensuring that access to logs containing personal data is strictly controlled and audited. This approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the core principles of data protection by design and by default, minimizing the risk of non-compliance and potential data breaches. It demonstrates a commitment to responsible data stewardship, which is a fundamental ethical and regulatory expectation. Incorrect approaches fail to adequately consider these data protection principles. One incorrect approach might involve enabling maximum logging without a clear justification or a plan for data sanitization, thereby indiscriminately collecting and retaining potentially sensitive personal information. This violates the principle of data minimization and purpose limitation, increasing the risk of unauthorized access or disclosure and exposing the organization to significant regulatory penalties. Another incorrect approach could be to ignore the potential for personal data within SCP logs, assuming that security logs are inherently exempt from data protection laws. This demonstrates a critical failure in understanding the scope of applicable regulations and the potential for incidental data collection, leading to a high risk of non-compliance. A third incorrect approach might be to implement overly broad access controls to logs, which, while seemingly secure, could hinder legitimate security investigations or audits, creating a different kind of operational and compliance risk. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a thorough risk assessment that specifically considers data privacy implications. This includes identifying what types of data SCP might collect, how that data is processed and stored, and who has access to it. Professionals should consult with legal and compliance teams to ensure their SCP configurations and policies align with all applicable data protection laws. Implementing a phased approach to logging, starting with minimal necessary data and gradually increasing as justified by security needs and risk assessments, is a prudent strategy. Regular audits of log data and access controls are also essential to maintain ongoing compliance and security. Question 18. Which approach would be most effective in managing the deployment of a critical Symantec Endpoint Protection 14 update that addresses known security vulnerabilities, while minimizing the risk of operational disruption? Option A. Delay the update until a formal request is received from the IT Steering Committee or a specific business unit that reports a direct impact from the vulnerability. Option B. Deploy the update only to systems designated as non-critical, leaving critical servers and user workstations unpatched until further notice. Option C. Conduct a pilot deployment of the update to a small, representative group of systems and users, gather feedback and monitor performance before proceeding with a phased rollout to the rest of the organization. Option D. Implement the update immediately across all production systems to ensure all endpoints are protected from the identified vulnerabilities as quickly as possible. The correct answer is D. Implement the update immediately across all production systems to ensure all endpoints are protected from the identified vulnerabilities as quickly as possible. Explanation. Scenario analysis. The scenario presents a common challenge in IT security administration: the need to implement a critical security update for Symantec Endpoint Protection, SEP 14, without causing significant disruption to business operations. The challenge lies in balancing the urgency of patching known vulnerabilities against the potential for unforeseen compatibility issues or performance degradation that could impact productivity and revenue. A hasty deployment could lead to system downtime, data loss, or security gaps if the update itself introduces new problems. Conversely, delaying the update exposes the organization to the risks associated with the unpatched vulnerabilities. This requires a methodical and risk-aware approach. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased rollout strategy, beginning with a pilot deployment in a controlled environment. This aligns with best practices for change management and risk mitigation, which are implicitly supported by regulatory frameworks that mandate due diligence in protecting organizational assets and ensuring business continuity. By testing the SCP-14 update on a small, representative subset of systems, e.g., a test lab or a non-critical department. Administrators can identify and address any compatibility issues, performance impacts, or unexpected behaviors before a full-scale deployment. This proactive testing allows for the collection of data and feedback, enabling informed decisions about the broader rollout. This approach minimizes the risk of widespread disruption and ensures that the update is stable and effective, thereby upholding the organization's responsibility to maintain a secure and operational environment. Incorrect approach is analysis. Deploying the update immediately to all production systems without prior testing represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It demonstrates a disregard for risk management principles and could lead to widespread system outages, data breaches, or non-compliance with data protection regulations if the update causes security vulnerabilities or data integrity issues. This approach prioritizes speed over safety and due diligence. Rolling out the update only to non-critical systems while ignoring critical infrastructure or user-facing applications is also an inadequate approach. While it attempts to limit immediate impact, it leaves critical assets vulnerable to the identified threats. This selective patching can create an uneven security posture, making the organization susceptible to attacks targeting the unpatched critical systems. It fails to provide comprehensive protection as expected by security mandates. Waiting for a formal request from a specific department before deploying the update, even if the vulnerability is known and critical, is another failure. Security is a proactive function, not a reactive one based on departmental requests. This approach abdicates the security team's responsibility to protect the entire organization and can lead to significant delays in addressing known threats, potentially resulting in breaches that could have been prevented. This demonstrates a lack of understanding of the security team's mandate and the potential consequences of inaction. Professional reasoning. Professionals in IT security administration must adopt a risk-based approach to change management. This involves a systematic process of assessing the potential impact of any change, planning for its implementation, and monitoring its effects. When dealing with security updates, the urgency of patching known vulnerabilities must be weighed against the potential for disruption. A phased rollout, starting with pilot testing, is a cornerstone of this process. This allows for the validation of the update's effectiveness and stability in a controlled manner, thereby minimizing risks to the production environment. Professionals should always prioritize the integrity and security of the entire organization, making informed decisions based on thorough testing and risk assessment, rather than succumbing to pressure for immediate, untested deployment or delaying action due to procedural inefficiencies. Question 19. The review process indicates that a newly implemented Symantec Endpoint Protection (SEP) policy has caused unexpected disruptions to critical business applications. To prevent future occurrences and ensure regulatory compliance, what is the most appropriate administrative action to take regarding the SEP policy and its deployment? Option A. Disable specific security features within the SEP policy that are suspected of causing the disruptions, without further investigation or documentation. Option B. Proceed with the broad deployment of the policy as planned, assuming that any issues will be minor and self-correcting over time. Option C. Continue with the current policy but instruct users to report any application issues and address them on a case-by-case basis as they arise. Option D. Immediately roll back the policy to its previous stable state, conduct a comprehensive impact analysis in a staging environment, and then redeploy with a phased rollout and enhanced monitoring. The correct answer is D. Immediately roll back the policy to its previous stable state, conduct a comprehensive impact analysis in a staging environment, and then redeploy with a phased rollout and enhanced monitoring. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT security administration, balancing the need for robust security controls with the operational requirements of end users and the organization's compliance obligations. The administrator must navigate the potential for Symantec Endpoint Protection (SEP) policies to inadvertently disrupt critical business processes, which can lead to significant financial and reputational damage. The challenge lies in proactively identifying and mitigating these risks without compromising the overall security posture, all while adhering to regulatory frameworks. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented process for policy deployment and monitoring. This includes thorough testing in a controlled environment before broad rollout, establishing clear rollback procedures, and implementing continuous monitoring of system performance and security logs. This methodology directly supports regulatory compliance by demonstrating due diligence, risk management, and a commitment to maintaining system integrity. Specifically, it aligns with principles of good governance and operational resilience, often mandated by regulations that require organizations to have robust IT controls and incident response plans. The proactive nature of this approach minimizes the likelihood of security incidents and operational disruptions, thereby safeguarding sensitive data and ensuring business continuity, which are key objectives of many regulatory frameworks. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing a new SCP policy without prior testing in a production or near-production environment is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach demonstrates a lack of due diligence and risk assessment, potentially leading to widespread system outages or security vulnerabilities. Such an oversight could violate regulations requiring organizations to implement and maintain effective security measures and to conduct risk assessments. Deploying a policy and then waiting for user complaints or system failures to address issues is reactive and unprofessional. This approach fails to meet the standard of proactive security management expected under most regulatory frameworks. It indicates a failure to implement adequate monitoring and testing, which could result in prolonged periods of compromised security or operational inefficiency, leading to non-compliance with data protection and operational integrity mandates. Disabling certain security features within SEP to appease user complaints without a formal risk assessment and documented exception process is a direct violation of security best practices and likely regulatory requirements. This action undermines the very purpose of the security software and exposes the organization to significant threats. It demonstrates a failure to adhere to security policies and could lead to breaches, violating data protection laws and industry-specific regulations. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach to security policy management. This involves understanding the potential impact of any change, conducting thorough testing, and having a clear plan for deployment, monitoring, and remediation. Decision-making should be guided by a framework that prioritizes data protection, system integrity, and business continuity, while ensuring adherence to all applicable regulatory requirements. This includes establishing clear change management processes, maintaining comprehensive documentation, and fostering open communication with stakeholders. Question 20. The assessment process reveals a critical vulnerability in a widely used third-party application deployed across the organization, for which Symantec Endpoint Protection 14 is also installed. While a patch is available, its deployment requires significant downtime for the affected business units, and the IT security team has limited resources for immediate testing and rollout. The potential impact of exploitation includes data exfiltration and service disruption, leading to substantial financial losses and reputational damage. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action to manage this risk? Option A. Conduct a targeted risk assessment to identify the most critical systems running the vulnerable application and prioritize mitigation efforts for those systems, potentially implementing temporary compensating controls where immediate patching is not feasible. Option B. Immediately block all network access to the vulnerable application across the entire organization until a patch can be deployed to prevent any potential exploitation. Option C. Focus solely on the cost of developing and deploying the patch, delaying any action until the cost-benefit analysis clearly favors immediate remediation. Option D. Defer any remediation efforts until a stable, organization-wide patch is developed and tested, as the cost of downtime for immediate patching is too high. The correct answer is A. Conduct a targeted risk assessment to identify the most critical systems running the vulnerable application and prioritize mitigation efforts for those systems, potentially implementing temporary compensating controls where immediate patching is not feasible. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity administration, balancing the need for robust security controls with the operational realities of a business. The discovery of a vulnerability in a critical business application, coupled with the potential for significant financial and reputational damage, creates a high-stakes situation. The challenge lies in making a timely and effective risk mitigation decision that aligns with both security best practices and business objectives, all while adhering to the regulatory framework governing Symantec Endpoint Protection 14 administration. The pressure to act quickly without causing undue disruption to business operations adds a layer of complexity. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic risk assessment process that prioritizes mitigation based on the severity of the vulnerability and its potential impact. This aligns with the principles of risk management, which are implicitly or explicitly part of most regulatory frameworks for IT security. Specifically, for the administration of Symantec Endpoint Protection 14, this would involve leveraging the product's capabilities to identify the affected systems, assess the exploitability of the vulnerability, and determine the potential business impact. The chosen mitigation strategy should be proportionate to the risk, aiming to reduce the likelihood or impact of a successful exploit. This approach ensures that resources are allocated effectively to address the most critical threats first, thereby maintaining a strong security posture without unnecessarily hindering business operations. This aligns with the general expectation of due diligence in managing IT security risks. Incorrect approaches analysis. Ignoring the vulnerability until a patch is readily available is a failure to exercise due diligence and proactive risk management. This approach creates an unacceptable window of exposure, potentially leading to a security incident that could have been prevented. It violates the principle of timely risk mitigation and could be seen as a dereliction of duty, especially if the vulnerability is known to be actively exploited. Implementing a broad, system-wide block on the application without a thorough risk assessment is an overreaction. While it might seem like a decisive action, it can cause significant operational disruption and financial loss if the application is critical. This approach fails to consider the principle of least privilege and proportionality in security controls, potentially creating more problems than it solves. It also bypasses the necessary steps of risk assessment and impact analysis, which are fundamental to responsible IT security management. Focusing solely on the cost of remediation without considering the potential impact of a breach is a financially driven but security-ignorant approach. This neglects the broader business risks, including regulatory fines, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust, which can far outweigh the cost of remediation. This approach demonstrates a misunderstanding of the true cost of security incidents and fails to meet the ethical and professional obligation to protect organizational assets and data. Professional reasoning. Professionals administering Symantec Endpoint Protection 14 must adopt a structured risk assessment methodology. This involves 1. Identification, clearly identifying the vulnerability and the affected systems. 2. Analysis, assessing the likelihood of exploitation and the potential impact on business operations and data. 3. Evaluation, prioritizing risks based on their severity. 4. Treatment, selecting and implementing appropriate mitigation strategies, which may include patching, configuration changes, or temporary workarounds. 5. Monitoring, continuously reviewing the effectiveness of implemented controls. This systematic process ensures that decisions are informed, proportionate, and aligned with both security objectives and business needs, adhering to the implicit and explicit requirements of responsible IT security administration.